This is the Late Round Podcast with your host, JJ Zacharisa.
What's up, everyone? It's JJ Zacharisa, and this is episode 622 of the Late Round Fantasy Football Podcast, sponsored by FanDuel. Thanks for tuning in. Amon-Ra St. Brown is a hot topic in the dynasty community, and he probably will be all offseason. With DJ Chark signing in Detroit this past week, the Amon-Ra St. Brown debate resurfaced. People against St. Brown will point out the fact that he wasn't a day one or a day two pick in the NFL draft. But even more central to their argument is the fact that St. Brown was not productive until DeAndre Swift and TJ Hawkinson were sidelined last year. That's when we really saw the Amon-Ra St. Brown blow up happen. And that's where we saw some unsustainable production. And that's not wrong. That argument is not wrong. St. Brown had one game of overlap where he was balling out with TJ Hawkinson active, and technically DeAndre Swift was back at the end of the year, but he wasn't the same player. He was barely seeing the ball. St. Brown mostly did what he did without those players. And during that stretch, he averaged a 34% target share per game to go along with more than 25 PPR points per game. And this is coming from a dude who was drafted in round 4. So clearly, given all of this, he's got to be a sell, right? Well, given how I've set this up, you're probably waiting for me to give you reasons why St. Brown is someone that you should be trading for, not trading away. But that's not really what I'm here to do. I'm more so here to explain my process with Amon-Ra St. Brown and how I generally feel about how people are approaching him. Now, by now, you all know where I stand with targets as a statistic. I'm a firm believer that targets are earned. You need to get open in order to see a target, or you need a team to want to get you the ball. If a team is trying to get you the ball, that's a signal that you're talented. 35% target shares don't just magically happen across a 6-game stretch. I don't care what your competition looks like. You're still playing with NFL caliber players. Do you think Amon-Ra St. Brown is the first player to have ever played alongside poor competition? Not only that, but he did this as a rookie. I feel like that's sometimes lost here too. If you just look at what he did on a points per game basis, if you include even the games where he wasn't featured that much, he's part of a pretty freaking good group of wideouts right now. Since 2011, there have been 29 rookie wide receivers in the NFL to hit 12 or more PPR points per game. And keep in mind, Amon-Ra St. Brown was well above that number. He was at 13.4. Among those 29, you have stud after stud after stud. I don't want to read you the whole list because it would take forever, but the only true misses on that list of 29 are Darius Slayton, Martavis Bryant, Kelvin Benjamin, and Jordan Matthews. And mind you, some of those players that I just named didn't hit 13 PPR points per game when Amon-Ra St. Brown did. Maybe you could throw Sammy Watkins in there, maybe Chase Claypool, maybe Brandon Ayuk, maybe Elijah Moore. We just don't know yet with some of those guys. But the fact that I'm even calling out Claypool and Watkins and Ayuk and Elijah Moore, that shows you just how good this list is. So let's pretend that those players, the players that missed on that list of 29, and again, those 29 players are rookies who hit 12 or more PPR points per game since 2011. Let's pretend that those players who were misses are Amon-Ra St. Brown's worst case scenario. Let's focus on the 4 who we know were sure busts. Darius Slayton, Martavis Bryant, Kelvin Benjamin, and Jordan Matthews. Rather than look at how poorly those guys played after year 1, I think what's arguably just as important is looking at how the market reacted. Because the question with Amon-Ra St. Brown right now isn't just, is this sustainable? Number one, it's not sustainable. What he did at the end of last year, not sustainable. But he's not priced in a way that people are making that assumption. The question is not just about the sustainability of his production. It's also about the sustainability of his market value. Ask yourself the question, what if St. Brown takes a major step back in year 2? What if Amon-Ra St. Brown does what those other misses did? We can look at the players who busted alongside DynastyLeagueFootball.com's average draft position data to help us, which you guys can access over on DynastyLeagueFootball.com. During the January after Darius Slayton's rookie season, he had an overall ADP of 91.5. He came from nowhere, so it's not surprising that his ADP was not very high despite a good rookie year. During Slayton's second season, he scored 3 touchdowns. He didn't see any real improvement in yards or receptions. and his overall ADP went from about 92 to 122, which all things considered, that's not a very big drop. When you're drafting 92nd overall or 122nd overall, that's not a big drop. Those are generally similar players. Okay, let's move on to Martavis Bryant. After his rookie season, he had an ADP of 56 overall. That rose to 20th overall after his second year. And then after his third year, when he was suspended, it fell to 74. Bryant's a weird case because of all the off-the-field stuff, but after year 2, despite being a bust right now, he saw his ADP rise dramatically. Then there's Kelvin Benjamin. Benjamin had an ADP of 31 after his rookie year. He completely missed his second season because of a torn ACL. His ADP, despite missing his sophomore campaign in the NFL, it dropped 6 spots. That's it, 6 spots year over year. Jordan Matthews, he had an ADP of 27 overall after his rookie season. He saw slightly better numbers in year 2, but it wasn't dramatic. There was no dramatic increase. From year 1 to year 2, his ADP moved up 1 spot. Even after a down year 3, his ADP was still 39th overall. This is what I think is missing with the Amon-Ra St. Brown argument. There's a lot of cushion to his market value. If he has like a 25th percentile season, he can still maintain decent value in Dynasty. So buying into St. Brown as a low-end wide receiver 2 or a high-end wide receiver 3 right now, it's a lot easier to stomach that when you know that he has to completely flop for his value to really tank. You're not buying into a player who's 29 years old and after one bad season, we all question if this is the end for him. Like if Allen Robinson goes out wherever he signs, at the time of this recording, I have no idea where he signs. If Allen Robinson goes out and has a terrible 2022 campaign, what do you think is going to happen to his ADP? It's going to tank like we saw with AJ Green. And again, I'm not positioning this in a way to say that St. Brown is a buy right now. In fact, I don't think the Lions are done adding wide receivers. And when they add a piece potentially in the draft, St. Brown's value is going to drop even more. Because not only did they get Chark, and not only are Hawkinson and Swift coming back, but now you might have another incoming rookie to, quote, take targets away from St. Brown. But good players see a baseline target share. There's zero chance St. Brown will maintain a 35% target share per game rate. But no one is expecting that. Can he hit a 20% target share with decent competition around him? Absolutely. Because that's what good players do. They command the ball. And all signs point to St. Brown being a good player. Why are people out there giving TJ Hawkinson the benefit of the doubt, but not Amon-Ra St. Brown? Why are we assuming an offense wants to run its passing game through a running back and not a young wide receiver? That doesn't make any sense. It would take a lot for St. Brown's value to completely sink year over year. Maybe it happens, but we're playing probability. We're placing bets. And my bet is that even though St. Brown may not have this insane long-term ceiling, we also know that based on how the markets have shifted historically, we know that it's unlikely St. Brown just completely tanks his value. Now, I just wanted to open with this because it stems back to what the Rewind episode was all about on Monday. We have to always try to look at how assets appreciate in value. It's so important in Dynasty. Now, before getting into the questions this week, because this is a mailbag show, college basketball fans, the bracket is set and FanDuel and GMC have teamed up to give you 3 chances to win a share of $70,000 in DFS site credit. Introducing the GMC Mountain Climber Series, a completely free-to-play brand new contest series that gives you a chance to win big throughout the first 3 rounds of the men's big dance. Here's how it works. Just correctly select the winners of each matchup listed of the round's games. The more selections you answer correctly, the higher you'll move up the mountain. Using GMC's custom mountain climber leaderboard, you'll be able to see where you stack up against the competition in real time every day. If you get every answer correct, you'll reach the summit and win your share of $20,000 in DFS site credit each round. As an added bonus, 100 lucky fans who entered any of the contests will win a share of the $10,000 bonus DFS site credit prize. Head to FanDuel and reserve your spot in the GMC Mountain Climber Series, and head to gmc.com/future-vehicles/2022-Sierra to reserve your new GMC Sierra. The first question this week is from Patreon. It's from Reese. It says, Mitch Trubisky? That's it. That's the question. But seriously, thoughts on the Steelers' new quarterback? What kind of value do you think he will have in fantasy this year? And if you have him in Dynasty, what would you be doing with him? Thanks, love the pod and your new venture. Thanks, Reese. I think it would be tough to deal Trubisky in Dynasty because his actual usefulness in fantasy will outweigh the perception. Everyone thinks, and understandably so, that Mitch Trubisky is not good. The likelihood that he goes on some Ryan Tannehill trajectory is small. But as a starter, he can produce because of what he can do as a runner. He averaged over 2 additional points per game with his legs the last time that we saw him. And the Steelers are doing what they can to boost the offensive line through free agency. And there are good weapons there. Trubisky is someone who will make a ton of sense this year as a QB3 in Superflex leagues as a result. So I'm not ready to trade him away unless I get a really good offer. Mostly because I don't think anyone is a believer. But if he starts producing the first few weeks of the season, you can trade him away then. Similar to what we saw with Sam Darnold this past year. This next question is from Twitter from @NARPDad. It says, how should we approach rookies in startup drafts pre-NFL draft? Yeah, the vast majority of people don't like doing drafts with rookies before the actual NFL draft because we don't know landing spots pre-draft, obviously. That's the reason people don't want to do it. But there are benefits to it. Number one, it's actually pretty fun. It's fun having players on your team and hoping they get good draft capital and a good landing spot. But number two, if you're on top of things, you can honestly benefit. You can find an edge by doing these drafts pre-draft. There are sites out there like grindingthemocks.com and NFLmockdraftdatabase.com that help us predict potential draft capital. Like, I may really like the production profile of Tyler Beatty, but he's expected to be a day 3 pick, so I've got to temper expectations. On the flip side, John Mechie isn't really doing it for me on the production end, but he's got good projected draft capital, or at least decent projected draft capital. So if he falls in a draft happening before the NFL draft, then he could actually become a big value. So analyze prospects the way that you generally analyze them. Like, things shouldn't drastically change for the higher end picks in a startup draft or a rookie draft pre and post draft. It can for some players, but it's not the norm. And utilize those sites to help see what kind of draft capital a player could get. At the end of the day, we shouldn't overrate landing spot generally to begin with, especially for our early round picks, like I just said. So doing your startup draft or rookie draft prior to the NFL draft, it means you definitely won't be swayed based on landing spot. That's not a bad thing because you shouldn't drastically be swayed anyway. Speaking of landing spot, this next one is from Kirby on Patreon and it says, hey JJ, love the prospect guide that you shared. Thanks. I found it very interesting and helpful. How much do you factor in landing spots and team outlook for players, particularly in redraft leagues? For example, if Garrett Wilson gets drafted by the Panthers, assuming no quarterback change, versus Drake London going to a team like the Raiders. Thank you. So just so it's clear, I'm recording this episode before any Deshaun Watson news. So I'm talking about the Panthers here without Deshaun Watson. I have no idea if they're going to get him or not. But yeah, the nice part about redraft is that you can very easily project that current season that you're concerned about. I mean, maybe I shouldn't say easily, but we can actually make year-long projections in redraft. It's harder to do that in Dynasty because you're looking across multiple years and situations can change. So we're buying into talent a lot more in Dynasty, or who you think is talented, because of that fact. Because situations can change. And you should always do that, to be fair. You should always look at talent first. I just mean if you want lasting production, you shouldn't be prioritizing landing spot in Dynasty. But in redraft, there are going to be instances where a team in a singular season can make an average player look a lot better, if that makes sense. I still do consider landing spot in Dynasty when I'm looking within a tier. Like with Rashad Bateman last year. He got pushed down within his own tier in favor of Elijah Moore because Baltimore's a spot where we know they're going to be fairly run heavy as long as Lamar Jackson's the quarterback. But take the London and Wilson example. There's a good chance both players are in the same tier for me in Dynasty post-draft. But if London went to the Raiders and Wilson went to a team with a bad quarterback situation, assuming no quarterback change, I likely would go with London a good bit more in redraft. They wouldn't be in the same tier like they are in Dynasty. And it's because that immediate situation is better. And I only have to care about that immediate situation in redraft leagues. This next question is another one from Patreon. It's from Robert. It says, JJ, curious which upcoming third-year wide receivers did super well in your Z prospect model and subsequently year 2 model, but didn't actually produce in year 2. Since your model is looking at first 3 years for possible success, I'm wondering if we have some obvious buys in Dynasty or undervalued targets in redraft. If the Wilson trade didn't happen, I was thinking maybe Jeudy. Feels like I can tell a story about why he didn't succeed last year. Maybe Brandon Ayuk or Michael Pittman, unless we think last year was breakout-ish already. Thanks, JJ. Love the pod. Thanks. So there's a little bit of lingo in this question that I want to clear up. The Z prospect model is what my prospect model is called, very creatively. People are becoming more and more aware of it now because the prospect guide dropped on Monday, so they're reading it. The Z prospect model is looking at these players as they enter the league. The year 2 model is a combination of that prospect model and how players performed in year 1. It helps predict how they're going to do in years 2 and 3. Naturally, the year 2 model is way more predictive than the prospect model because the year 2 model is actually utilizing NFL data. You have a year's worth of NFL data for these players. It's not just their prospect profile. So after a year in the NFL, we have a way better idea of who's good and who's not. Anything above the 95th percentile in the year 2 model is considered excellent. Those are the players that I want to buy in fantasy. In that 2020 class, which was very good, the players above that mark, CeeDee Lamb, Jerry Jeudy, T. Higgins, Justin Jefferson, and Brandon Ayuk. The next tier then included Chase Claypool. But hit rates in the 90 to 95th percentile grouping, they're not as good. So I guess from that, just based on your question, Ayuk sort of makes sense. As does Jerry Jeudy, but his price point is rising a ton because of the Russell Wilson trade. So I guess that's my answer for this one. Brandon Ayuk. The last question this week is from @MoneyMike902. How do you feel about Devontae Smith's value in dynasty leagues with him being tied to Jalen Hurts? I'm debating on making a trade for him, but Hurts scares me, honestly. Is it possible for a run-first quarterback to develop into an above-average passer? In my opinion, Lamar always showed the arm talent. So let's first answer this by looking at Devontae Smith, the player. A breakdown of Smith is in my prospect guide because I have like 35 pages dedicated to the year 2 model. And Devontae Smith in that model is in a tier where we see really, really good hit rates. Like, it would be shocking if Smith just disappeared and didn't give us at least a wide receiver 3 type season in either year 2 or year 3. Because he's good and he was an elite prospect. But I think this could be a time to buy Smith overall, not just because of that, but because we can't make the assumption that Jalen Hurts is a long-term answer. I mean, he might be. We just don't know that yet. But picture a scenario where he is the actual long-term answer. You think Philadelphia is going to stick with him if he doesn't improve as a passer? And if he improves as a passer, that's a good thing for the pass catchers. We've heard and seen so many rumors over the last year and a half that seem to tell us that the Eagles aren't totally bought in with Jalen Hurts. As we're seeing across the league right now, it's not exactly a good time to need a quarterback or to make a change. So it makes sense to keep Hurts as the starter and hope he can improve as a passer. And I think there's genuine hope for that. So either Hurts gets better as a passer, and that's good for Smith, or they go and they make a change, and that has a chance to switch the offense into being less of a run-heavy one. So Devontae Smith, to me, is more of a buy than a sell. We can't let this short-term situation, which still isn't like horrendous, but we can't let that short-term situation distort our long-term outlook. That's going to do it for today's show, though. Thanks to all of you for listening. If you get subscribed to the Late Round Fantasy Football Podcast, make sure you are by searching for it pretty much anywhere podcasts can be found. And don't forget to follow me on Twitter @LateRoundQB. Thanks for listening, everyone. I really, really appreciate it. Make sure you go check out everything that's going on over at lateround.com. You can buy the prospect guide for $14.99. People seem to like it so far, so that's good. You can also become a patron, and we have a Discord now for our patrons. So definitely check that out, lateround.com. Otherwise, I'll talk to you next week.